Emily had lived in the same neighborhood for years, in a small but inviting house that had slowly become her sanctuary. Across the tidy green lawn stood the Thompsons' home, a place always alive with laughter and warmth. They had always made her feel like family. Over the years, Emily had seen their son Daniel grow up, once a scrappy boy racing his bike up and down the pavement, now a composed young man carrying himself with quiet certainty. Time had slipped by almost unnoticed. Children grew older, routines stayed familiar, seasons blurred into one another. That's just how life was, until it decided to catch her off guard. That summer, as tradition demanded, the Thompsons threw their annual neighborhood barbecue, a highlight for everyone on the block. By late afternoon, the backyard was alive with chatter and scent, the smoky sweetness of grilled food in the air, laughter floating above the rhythmic hum of upbeat music. Emily arrived as she always did, greeted by smiles and the gentle comfort of routine. She chatted with Mrs. Thompson about her famous potato salad, exchanged work stories with friends, and lent a hand when extra plates needed washing. Everything felt charmingly ordinary, predictable in the best way. But underneath the ease of that evening, something subtle had changed. When Emily happened to glance across the yard, her eyes found Daniel. He wasn't the reserved teenager she remembered from years past. He had grown, mid-20s now, tall and assured, with an easy stillness that drew quiet attention. His voice, when he spoke to someone nearby, was calm but confident, the kind of voice that made people listen. Emily felt a faint curiosity stir. It wasn't so much attraction as surprise. A sudden realization that the boy she'd once known was no longer a boy at all. She quickly brushed the thought aside. He was Daniel, the Thompsons' son, practically family, nothing more than that. As the evening stretched into twilight, laughter rippled through the yard, children chased fireflies near the fence, and fading sunlight turned everything gold. Eventually, the crowd began to drift home. Porch lights flickered on up and down the street, while cars rolled slowly out of driveways. Emily lingered to help tidy up, gathering cups, stacking dishes, brushing crumbs from tables. She always enjoyed helping Mrs. Thompson close down the night. She didn't even notice at first when the chatter thinned to silence. By the time she straightened from folding the last napkin, the yard was nearly empty. Daniel's parents had stepped inside, the screen door swinging gently shut behind them, and suddenly Emily realized she was alone on the porch, with Daniel. The music inside had softened to a faint murmur. Only the chirping of crickets filled the warm night as a gentle breeze carried notes of charcoal and summer air. The hush between them felt heavy, charged in a way she couldn't quite name. Dusting off her palms, Emily turned and found Daniel looking directly at her. His expression wasn't casual. His eyes held focus, determination, something searching. For a heartbeat, she wondered if she had a smudge on her face. But no. This was a different kind of gaze, one that made her pulse stumble and her chest tighten, as though her body recognized something before her mind did. She cleared her throat, eager to shatter the silence. "Your parents really outdid themselves this year. The food was incredible," she said, perhaps too brightly. Daniel nodded, though his eyes didn't waver. "Yeah," he said quietly. "They love having people here." His tone was gentle but distant. His voice carried a weight she wasn't sure how to respond to. She waited for him to add something light, maybe a joke about the kids playing tag or about how quickly the lemonade had disappeared. But no such words came. He only stood there, steady beneath the porch light's glow, watching her with calm intensity. The soft amber light fell over both of them, turning the night almost dreamlike. Emily shifted her weight, feeling suddenly awkward in a space that had always felt so comfortable. For years she had known Daniel as the dependable neighbor, the boy who helped carry groceries or shoveled snow in winter. But the man standing before her now wasn't simply an echo of that memory. Something fundamental had changed. Then he spoke, his voice low and deliberate. "Emily, I've been meaning to tell you something." Her breath caught, and without knowing why, she braced herself. She set the folded tablecloth on a nearby chair and faced him fully. The air between them seemed to pulse with quiet expectation. From somewhere down the street, a car door closed with a distant thump, but neither of them moved. His gaze held hers, unbroken and sure. It was suddenly as though all the years she'd known him, the summers, the small hellos, the ordinary neighborly gestures, had narrowed into this one suspended moment. Before she could even frame a question, he continued, his words simple but thrumming with feeling. I've wanted to tell you this for a long time. Time seemed to flatten. The world, the night, the distant sounds, all of it held still around them. Daniel took a cautious step closer, his expression open yet firm. I don't really know the right way to say this, he admitted softly. You've been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. You've always been kind to me, not just as a neighbor, but as someone who really saw me. And somewhere along the way, it became more than that. Emily's heart pounded wildly. She didn't want to meet his eyes, yet she couldn't look away. 100 reasons clawed through her mind. He was younger. He was family friend close. He was supposed to belong to a different chapter of her life entirely. But his sincerity dismantled every objection as easily as breath fogs a window. I've admired you for years, Daniel went on quietly. You're thoughtful and strong. You've always carried yourself with this calm warmth that, well, I can't explain it. I just know I can't keep pretending I don't feel it. Emily's throat felt tight, her pulse audible in her ears. She had prepared herself for small talk, not a confession that cracked something open inside her. Daniel, she whispered, uncertain, her voice trembling around his name. He smiled faintly, nervous but determined. I know this is unexpected. I don't mean to make you uncomfortable, I just can't keep it to myself anymore. And in that fragile pause, time rolled backward and forward at once. She saw flashes of him at 12, waving shyly from his bike. At 16, laughing while helping his parents with boxes. And now, standing before her, a man who looked at her like she was the only person that mattered. From inside the house, laughter and clinking plates drifted out, slicing into the thick silence that hung between them. His parents moved around the kitchen, oblivious to the quiet tension right outside their door. Emily tried to speak, but the conflict in her chest tangled every thought. Daniel's voice, when it came again, was nearly a whisper. You don't have to say anything now. I just needed you to know. Think about it. That's all I ask. That simple patience, the steady respect in his tone, struck her harder than any grand gesture could have. He wasn't demanding or dramatic. He was just laying truth bare and trusting her with it. Emily parted her lips to respond, but before she could, footsteps approached from inside. The kitchen door swung open, and Mrs. Thompson's cheerful voice floated out. Dessert's ready. Emily, you'll stay for cake, won't you? Emily stepped back quickly, her heart still pounding, her face flushed as though the warm air itself had learned her secret. She managed to smile. Of course, I'd love to. Daniel said nothing, but his eyes met hers one last time. That quiet look held more than words could reach, steady, promising, impossibly earnest. As they walked back inside, the familiar murmur of voices rose to meet them. The smell of pie drifted through the bright kitchen. Laughter filled every corner. Plates clinked with contentment. Emily joined in, smiling and responding as though nothing had happened. She even took a second slice of dessert, laughing at Mrs. Thompson's teasing about saving room. But her thoughts were elsewhere, still caught on that darkening porch, replaying every word Daniel had spoken. And each time she glanced up, she found him across the room, quiet, composed, waiting. He didn't stare, didn't intrude, but his presence was unmistakable. When at last the evening wound down and Emily rose to say goodnight, her smile was polite, but her mind was far from calm. By the time she finally stepped outside and walked across the lawn toward her own house, the night air still held his voice, as though it had imprinted itself somewhere deep inside her. Emily's emotions were in turmoil. The cool night air brushed her cheeks, but it did nothing to calm the heat still rushing through her. She closed her front door and leaned against it, her hand pressed to her chest as if to steady her racing heart. The truth was undeniable. Something had shifted. The boy next door wasn't a boy anymore, and his words had cracked open a door she hadn't even realized was there. As she climbed into bed that night, Emily knew one thing for certain. Nothing between her and Daniel would ever be the same again. Emily tossed and turned, the glow of the moon slipping through her curtains, painting soft light across her room. She couldn't quiet her thoughts. Daniel's voice replayed in her mind, every word carrying a weight that refused to fade. "I've admired you 4 years. Just think about it." Those sentences clung to her like a shadow she couldn't escape. She tried to reason with herself. He was younger. He was her neighbor. She had known him since he was a boy riding his bike down the street. It didn't make sense to feel the way she did. Yet the more she fought the thought, the stronger it pressed against her heart. He wasn't a boy anymore. He'd grown into a man who spoke with honesty, who looked at her without hesitation, who had the courage to lay his feelings bare. Emily sat up in bed rubbing her temples. She had always lived a steady, careful life. Her days were filled with work, her evenings with books and television, her weekends with neighborhood gatherings. Nothing had ever shaken her routine the way Daniel Zord's did. His confession had unsettled the quiet rhythm she clung to, leaving her restless, her emotions alive in a way she hadn't felt for years. The next morning, Emily forced herself into her normal routine coffee. A quick breakfast, then a walk to clear her head. But as she passed the Thompsons' house, her stomach tightened. She half hoped, half feared, that Daniel would step outside. When he didn't, she felt both relief and disappointment. She hated how complicated her emotions had become overnight. Throughout the week, she avoided being alone with him. She spoke to his parents, waved from a distance, and busied herself with errands. But no matter how much she tried to ignore him, her thoughts betrayed her. She remembered the steadiness of his gaze, the sincerity in his voice, the way he had promised he would wait. Those details followed her through the simplest tasks, watering her plants, folding laundry, even reading a book she couldn't concentrate on. One evening, while the sun was setting, Emily was in her garden. The sky was with gold and pink, and the air was filled with the soft hum of cicadas. She bent down to water the flowers when she heard footsteps approaching the fence. She looked up, and there he was, Daniel. He leaned lightly against the wooden post, his expression calm, almost cautious. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was expectant, filled with something unspoken. Finally, he broke it. "Did you think about what I said?" His voice was gentle, steady, without pressure. Emily's hand trembled slightly as she set the watering can down. She wanted to answer honestly, but the words stuck in her throat. Her heart beat wildly, torn between logic and emotion. She looked at him, her lips parting, but no sound came. Daniel's eyes softened. He gave a small, understanding smile, as if her silence said more than words. "It's all right," he said quietly. "I don't expect an answer right away. I'll wait, as long as it takes." The patience in his voice caught her off guard. He wasn't pushing her, wasn't demanding anything. He was simply standing there, open and steady, ready to let her take the time she needed. That made her chest ache in a way she hadn't expected. Emily managed a small nod. She wanted to tell him that his words had stayed with her, that they'd shaken her in ways she couldn't explain. But instead she picked up the watering can again, her hands unsteady, and forced herself to look at the flowers instead of him. Daniel didn't move closer. He didn't press. He just stood there watching her with quiet understanding and then said softly, "Good night, Emily." With that, he turned and walked back toward his house, leaving her alone with her racing thoughts. As the night deepened, Emily sat by her window, staring out at the quiet street. The glow from the Thompsons' porch light flickered through the trees. She felt the weight of a choice pressing against her. Though she didn't know what her answer should be, she thought of his patience. The way he hadn't tried to convince her, but had simply left his feelings open, trusting her to decide. She thought of his kindness, his maturity, the respect in his tone. He hadn't treated her like someone out of reach, but like someone worth waiting for. That realization stirred something deep inside her, a mix of longing and fear. Days slipped into weeks, but the tension didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger. Emily found herself watching from her window, sometimes catching glimpses of Daniel as he left for work, as he carried groceries, as he laughed with his parents on the porch. Each time her heart stirred, whispering truths she wasn't ready to face. She had always believed her life was settled, that her story was already written. But now, Daniel had opened a new chapter, one she hadn't expected, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't close it. That night, lying in bed again, Emily whispered into the dark. "What am I supposed to do?" Her voice was barely a breath, but the question was real, raw, and heavy. She didn't have an answer yet. All she knew was that Daniel's words had planted something inside her hearts, something that wouldn't go away, no matter how much she tried to deny it. And as she closed her eyes, one thought kept circling in her mind. This wasn't just passing curiosity or a fleeting moment. This was something deeper, something that had quietly grown between them over the years. Emily knew with startling clarity that her life could never return to the way it had been before. That night on the porch, something had changed forever. The days turned into weeks, and the weight of Daniel's words followed Emily everywhere she went. No matter how much she tried to distract herself with chores, work, or long walks, the memory of that summer night lingered. She remembered the way he had stood there, calm, patient, and understand how his voice had carried no pressure, only truth. It wasn't a confession she could ignore, and deep down, she knew it. Emily tried to convince herself that silence was safer, that if she kept her distance, the feelings would eventually fade. But the opposite happened. Each time she caught sight of Daniel, whether he was mowing the lawn or carrying groceries into his parents' house, her chest tightened. He didn't avoid her, nor did he push himself into her space. He simply existed nearby, steady and unchanging, and that quiet presence spoke louder than anything else. One evening, Emily stood in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. She didn't look any different from before, yet she felt as though something inside her had shifted forever. The truth was simple. She cared. She cared more than she wanted to admit, and no amount of reasoning could erase that. Denial had only made the feeling stronger that night. Instead of pacing the floor or burying herself in a book, Emily made a choice. She slipped on a light sweater, walked across the lawn, and knocked gently on the Thompsons' door. Her heart raced so loudly she thought she might lose her courage. But before she could change her mind, the door opened. Daniel stood there, surprised to see her, Heist's expression softening into something hopeful. "Emily," he said, his voice low, almost careful. "Can we talk?" she asked. Her tone was steady, though her palms were damp with nerves. He stepped outside, closing the door quietly behind him, and together they moved onto the porch. The evening air was cool, and the soft glow of the porch light wrapped them in a small circle of warmth. Emily folded her arms, more to steady herself than for comfort. She took a deep breath. "I've been avoiding this conversation," she began. "I thought if I ignored what you said, the feelings would pass. But they haven't. And the truth is," she paused, her voice catching for a moment before she pushed on, "I can't stop thinking about you either." Daniel's eyes widened, not with shock, but with quiet relief, as if he had been waiting to hear those words for far longer than she realized. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was filled with everything she had tried to deny, everything he had so patiently carried. Emily continued, her voice softer now. "I told myself this wasn't right, that it was too complicated that people would talk, that maybe I was imagining it. But every time I see you, every time I remember the way you spoke to me that night, I can't deny it anymore. You've become someone I can't ignore." Daniel stepped closer, expression open, his voice calm, but filled with emotion. "You meant every word I said. Emily, I wasn't looking for a quick answer. I just wanted you to know how I feel. And if this is how you feel too, then that's all I need." Her heart swelled at his simplicity. There were no grand promises, no sweeping declarations, only honesty, steady and true. It was enough, more than enough. They stood there in silence, the porch light flickering faintly, the sound of crickets filling the night. Emily felt the weight she had been carrying slowly lift from her shoulders. For weeks, she had wrestled with fear and doubt, but now, standing in front of him, she felt clarity. This wasn't about age, about neighbors, about what anyone else might think. This was about two people who had found something real and undeniable in each other. She gave a small, nervous laugh, her eyes glistening. "I don't know what happens next. I don't have answers to all the questions that will come. But I know you want to see where this goes with you." Daniel's face broke into a gentle smile, one that held both relief and quiet joy. He nodded, his voice firm yet tender. "That's all I hoped for, just a chance." In that moment, Emily realized that love didn't always arrive in the ways people expected. Sometimes it grew slowly, quietly, right next door, waiting patiently until the moment was right. And sometimes it asked for courage, to step past fear, past doubt into something unknown but beautiful. They didn't need more words. The silence between them was no longer heavy or uncertain. It was full, warm, and alive. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt peace. She had stopped running from her heart, and in return she had found something worth holding on to. As they stood together under the soft glow of the porch light, Emily knew one truth with absolute certainty. Her life had changed, and though the future was unwritten, she was ready to walk into it with Daniel by her side.